Welcome to the final official course in the school leadership program here at PUC. I'm Pam Frampton, and I have enjoyed guiding you so far, and I look forward to finishing with you on the final two courses, school administration and then your internship. The school administration course examines the role and responsibilities of the school principal. It will focus on leadership functions in staff and pupil personnel, school and class organization, plant management, instructional and educational programs, and school and community relations. The course is also designed to prepare you for the internship during the next course. I want to spend a little time explaining how this course will work and what the learning outcomes are. First, there are four modules in this course. Module 1, you'll learn about how to develop vision. In Module 2, you'll learn about how to articulate that vision. In Module 3, you'll learn what it takes to implement the vision. And in Module 4, you'll learn about how you can steward that vision that you've created. But first, let's begin with the first slide of Module 1. Or actually, it's slide 2. You will notice three elements of effective leadership. The first is the set of national standards developed during the 1990s by the Interstate School Leaders Licensure Consortium, better known as ISLIC. These standards have recently been revised, and they are now called ISLIC 2008. The earlier iteration of the standards included a long list with each of the 6 standards divided into knowledge, performances, and dispositions. ISLIC 2008 has removed these lists and simply includes areas of domain under each of the 6 standards, with hyperlinks to the body of research related to those domains. The basic language, though, of the standards has not changed. The 6 standards are vision, culture and instruction, management, community, ethics, legal, and political. And I know you've learned about these already with Dr. Colin in the first course that you took in our program. If you want to research more on these, you simply can type in ISLIC 2008 into a search engine. Effective school leaders must have a personal goal of attaining each of the standards at some point in their career. But for our purposes, we only expect you to have an emerging understanding of these standards. The standard that relates most closely to the outcomes of this course is Standard 1, Vision. An effective school leader will have to bring a community of learners into a shared vision. The leader must also be able to implement that vision, monitor that vision, and make sure it leads to student success. Obviously, your first year on the job will challenge you beyond your wildest dreams, so we will consider you a success if you can just make some progress toward the lofty goals of that first standard. The second element of effective leadership involves learning key skills that all leaders must have, whether in education or any other field for that matter. The National Association of School Principals suggests that there are 9 key skills that make principals successful. We'll look more closely at these in a few moments. The important thing to note here is that simply understanding that first standard, ISLIC 08 standard of vision, does not make a successful leader. Great leaders need to have some key skills as well. And then the third element on this slide is from a landmark study conducted by the McRell Research Group in 2002. They studied over 100 schools and identified 21 key behaviors that make the biggest difference in student achievement, which of course is what we're all going to be looking at. And we'll talk more about this as well. So to review, there are 3 elements that make up a good leader. First, the national standards. Second, the key skills. And third, the key behaviors that are outlined by the National Association of School Principals and by the McRell Research Group. And note that this course, School Administration, will focus mostly on this first standard, vision. And again, let's be reminded in Standard 3 that you cannot expect to attain the first standard or any others in your first years as a school leader. It could be argued that if you can just stay on your feet the first year, then you're doing a great job. Seriously, though, there are 3 stages of development with these standards. First, you will be in the stage known as the emerging stage. This stage includes your preparation, internship, and your 2-year residency. This is a time when you are reading about what vision means in a school setting, what it takes to lead adults through change, and how to bring a whole community of learners together with one vision. During your first 2 years, you will make exploratory steps as you attempt to create a community vision. You will make mistakes, but you will learn from them. The most common mistake is to set off on your own with your vision and forget to take along the rest of the community. After your first few years, you will become much more proficient at this. Then, toward the end of your career, you will be so expert at it that you will be asked to mentor young leaders. In the next standard, we will focus on the list of skills that have been identified as the most important skills for good leaders to have. We have hammered into your head during the first few courses in this program the 6 national standards, until I'm sure you wish you'd never heard of them. Now it's time to focus more specifically on how to make sure you don't fall on your face your first year as principal. The NASSP has identified key skills that all good leaders need to have, and you see the list on this slide. Let's take each one of these and talk about them, because each one is critical to your success. The first key skill is setting leadership direction. You may wonder what exactly that means. This skill can best be defined as implementing strategies for improving teaching and learning, including putting programs and improvement efforts into action. You will note that this skill is linked most closely to Standard 2, establishing school culture and instructional programs. The most important thing to remember here is that you are the leader of the group, and they are waiting for you to tell them where they're going. If you remember, immediately after the tragedy of 9/11, it was critical for President Bush to go right before the American people and present a clear plan of action and response to the crisis. The same thing can be said when considering a school leader's skill at making sure everyone understands what's going to happen and why. Don't ever assume that your staff understands what you're thinking. You need to be sure and tell them again. In addition, you need to explain clearly how and when things will take place. You will also need to raise the red flag when everyone is going off course. Leading change in these times of conflicting pressures can be compared to leading a group through a dark cave. You need to carry the torch high and help everyone stay up with the group. Another aspect of setting leadership direction is developing a vision and establishing clear goals, providing direction in achieving stated goals, encouraging others to contribute to goal achievement, securing commitment to a course of action from individuals and groups. Effective leaders understand that everyone needs to have a voice. It's very important to allow all parties to speak what's on their mind, even if it's not what you were hoping to hear. Free and open discussion can lead to powerful strategies when the conflicts are managed carefully. Remember that creating vision takes time. Don't try to rush things. In fact, during your first year, you should just sit back and listen. It will take at least a year for you to see clearly what the best vision is for that community. And now we move to slide 7 for Module 1 and look at the next skill identified by the National Association for School Principals. And they consider a key skill to be that you have to be a good team leader. You have to know how to lead teamwork and be a leader of other people. Effective leaders know how to encourage team members by praising their accomplishments in a sincere way. In addition, strong leaders know when to step in and help a fellow team member when they are struggling. The best principals are the ones who roll up their sleeves and work right alongside of their staff. Too many new principals believe that since they are now the boss, they must somehow act differently and stay above the staff. That kind of attitude will lead to immediate failure. Effective leaders use strategies to suggest it's time to move on, or it's time to regroup, or it's time to celebrate success. These strategies are also closely related to the first national standards for school principals, vision and creating culture. The next key skill in slide 8 is sensitivity. Again, I have seen too many principals really fail on this skill. And in fact, the reason principals lose their jobs is most often related to this very problem. I hope that you will remember that you should never put anything in writing when you're angry. Have the decency to go to the staff member who has upset you and ask calmly if the two of you can sit down together privately. Never criticize a staff member in front of others. Greet each person with the same cheerful attitude no matter who they are. Learn to say their names correctly. Use all the knowledge you gained in your classes on diversity to avoid offending someone's culture and values. Treat your staff members as if they were your family. Visit them when they're in the hospital. Call them when they need to be encouraged. Respect their privacy at all times, and never join in any gossip about another staff member. In slide 9, we look at another key skill, organization. And this one, again, is so critical. I can tell you story after story of new principals who were fired because they just couldn't manage their time effectively. When you're a classroom teacher, as most of you now are, you can make a mistake and only mess up things for about 25 to 30 students at a time. But when you're the principal, one mistake can make a mess of things for about 800 people. My biggest mistake that I made during my first year was I forgot to write down a musical convocation on my calendar. And I can still remember the cold shiver I felt when I looked out my office window and watched as about 40 musicians unloaded their instruments and started walking into our building. My only alternative was to announce that we had a convocation, and if anyone could work it into their schedule, then they were welcome to come. What a mess. It took me several weeks to apologize enough to the staff for them to begin to forgive me. Effective principals keep a very well-organized schedule on their PDA or in a notebook. You need to get to work early each day and spend time looking over the day's activities. Think carefully about the implications for the events of the day. Who needs to be reminded? Who will be affected the most? And how? And you must never put off things that need doing. I made a habit of clearing my desk and my emails and voicemails every day before I went home. If you are the kind of person who is constantly behind in your responsibilities, constantly apologizing for missing deadlines and meetings, constantly late, then you need to immediately start correcting these behaviors, or you will fail miserably as a school principal. This skill is most closely linked to Standard 3, management. It only takes a few seconds to determine whether a school is running efficiently. In most cases, a well-organized school is one where students are succeeding. The next skill on slide 10 is judgment. Again, I have seen several principals fail when this skill was missing. Good judgment is difficult to teach. It's something that most people either have or don't have. Here's how it works. A few years ago, I was in a district where we were having a problem with a local minister of a church who was passing out his religious tracts on the sidewalks of the schools. One of our principals saw him doing this and went stalking up to him angrily and told him to get off the property and leave her children alone. Her rash behavior caused the man to become even more fervent in his attempts to spread his teachings. Moreover, the principal had been warned by the central office legal advisors that the man was indeed within his rights to pass out literature on the sidewalks. Had this principal used good judgment, she would have picked up the phone first and asked what the central office wanted her to do. In this case, principals were told to monitor the man carefully and only intervene if he forced children to take his brochures or if he touched the children. It's always better to pick up the phone and ask for advice than to act too quickly. Good judgment is critical for good leadership. In the next slide, slide 11, you will notice the leadership skill of results orientation. This skill is related to knowing when to push a strategy through and when to nudge things along. A good leader knows when you're on a dead horse, dismount. I can remember clearly that I had to learn that lesson a hard way. I had the exciting opportunity in my career of developing a brand new school with a wonderful group of teachers, and we had decided to write our own literacy curriculum. During the first year, I noticed that the progress was going rather slowly, and I promptly called a meeting and informed everyone that the curriculum needed to be completed by February, which was 4 months away. A dead quiet fell over the group. It didn't take me long to realize that I was asking this hard-working group of people to do the impossible. I apologized and asked them to tell me what they needed. I needed to take responsibility and admit that I was wrong. I offered to help with whatever was needed. On the other hand, many new principals fail to act when crises arise. It's very tempting to hide in your office when there is conflict among the staff over some issue. Each opposing side will attempt to win the principal's favor. The effective principal will call meetings immediately and allow the issue to come into the light. Once everyone has had their say, the principal can guide the group to a consensus. Failing to act will only lead to bigger and bigger crises that might have been easily managed with quick actions. On the next slide, you'll notice another key skill of written and oral communication. These are essential for school leaders. The principal should set the tone for the community when it comes to communication. Memos, reports, newsletters should all be of very high quality. Effective communication can lead to success, but poor communication will most assuredly lead to failure. It's a good idea to have the secretary check everything you send out for errors. Remember that mistakes you make have an exponentially bigger impact than anyone else in the building. When you speak to the staff or to parents, you need to be easy to understand. Remember that parents aren't used to initials, such as ISTEP or NCLB, etc. You need to adjust your vocabulary to the audience. Also remember to keep PowerPoint slides simple and never read a PowerPoint to the audience. These skills are so important, and you will need to complete a self-assessment that is based on these skills. I realize that you haven't had a chance to practice any of this, but I still want you to consider where your strengths lie and where you may need to improve. You will find the self-assessment in the syllabus or on the course site. Check the syllabus for the due date. The assessment will be used as you work with your intern supervisor on your goals for your internship. In slide 13, we look at the last element of leadership that comes from a large study conducted by the McCrell Research Group. They studied hundreds of schools and identified the principal behaviors that had the largest impact on student achievement. This study became a landmark study since its findings resonated so closely to the current emphasis on student achievement by policymakers throughout the U.S. This slide simply lists the behaviors that showed the highest impact out of the 21. Why won't you work with a partner and discuss what you think each of these behaviors would look like? Post your comments on the course site. Answer the following questions. What would you see if a principal was displaying these behaviors? Which of these do you think would be the easiest to perform, and which would be the hardest?